All right, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Sam Broom. For those that have just come in, I'm from Sprott Wealth Management, and it's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce Morgan Hart from Emerald Resources. Emerald, it's an interesting company for me. It probably goes down as one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was turning down Rick's 40-cent financing for the construction of Okvau because I got scared of Cambodia, and that was my error. So quickly rectified that one when I realised just how good this guy is at building a company. So, it's for North American investors, it might be a name flying a little bit under the radar, but it's, in my opinion, it's a really interesting company, really worth paying attention here. They've knocked it out of the park the last 4 or 5 years. They're on their way to becoming a multi-asset producing company with another asset in Cambodia and another one in Australia on the way. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Morgan and let him give you the pitch.
Thanks very much, Sam. And thank you to Rick and the Symposium for the invitation to present the Emerald story here today. Rick and a lot of the investors here that followed Rick leads have been invested in Emerald and our previous company, Regis, through the growth stories from building mines along the way. And what I've known about Rick in that period that he's been supporting us is that his investment mantra is really about following management teams with track records of successful development and company building. At the same time with substantial skin in the game, preferably not that they've given themselves from the company, but they actually put their hand in their pocket to buy. And lastly, with a funded growth story, and that's what I'm presenting today. That's the Emerald story. I'd like to give you the key takeaway to start, so if you go to sleep during the presentation, you've actually heard it already, and I'll do it again at the end. But the key takeaway for us is we've got an organic pathway to become a multiple mine plus 300,000 ounces, close to 400,000 ounces per annum gold producer, with no further dilution to shareholders. And that's been our history through the previous companies, is to fund the first project, and then build the company out of the cash flow from the first project, and that's exactly what we're looking to do here. They've got the right team. The board of management's been together in many cases for over 30 years, and previous companies are now in Emerald. We've built 5 projects in the last 20 years, all on time, on budget, in some pretty difficult jurisdictions at the very, very low end of the capital cost scale. And the board of management, as I said, are aligned with shareholders by being big shareholders themselves. The first gold project we built is the Okvau gold project, so we've got a producing asset with gold exposure. It's fantastic to be in a gold environment at $3,300 US. We built a gold mine in 2000 in Queensland at $250, only 25 years ago. It's pretty easy to forget how strongly the gold price has performed in that last 25 years. That project to date's produced over 400,000 ounces at $850 all in sustaining costs US. We updated the resource in February 2025 and the reserves at Okvau. We started 5 years ago with about 1 million ounces of indicated resource and 900,000 ounces of reserves. We've still got 1 million ounces of indicated resource now because we keep replacing on a yearly basis the production loss through the production in exploration. We've got organic growth in Australia and Cambodia, and again, those that have followed us in the past will know that we like to be dividend paying, and all of our previous companies, Samantha, Equigold, Regis, and hopefully now at Emerald, we've been dividend paying. We've given multiples back in dividends to shareholders compared to what we've ever raised. We want to do that again. The way we do that in Australia with franking credits is by having an Australian asset. So we've done that. We took a company over last year, which is a bit more difficult than we had first anticipated, but we took that project over finally, 100% in June 24. That project brings 1,000 square kilometres of a singular belt in the northeast gold fields in Western Australia that we've already put 1 million ounces of resource out. You can expect an increase in that resource in the next 3 weeks. We've also got a second project in Cambodia, Memot, and I'll talk to you about the favoured position we are in Cambodia and how we ended up with the Memot project. But again, in a very short period of time, we've announced and made a 1 million ounce resource at Memot. We've already started construction at our Australian asset at the Dingo Ranges. We're about halfway through putting a 240-man camp in on the project. Cambodia, we've got a little bit of work to do to move about 240 families off the project itself. That should be done in the next 6 months, and we'll be building both of those projects next year to bring our production up to that close to 400,000 ounces. In terms of a shareholder structure, as I said, As directors, we own 18% of the company. We're paid for our position. We don't give options to the key directors on the board. We give them obviously to key executive staff, but as a team ourselves of directors, chairman, managing director, and then the other key non-executive directors, we don't give any options to ourselves. The institutional investors are well covered in Europe and the US. BlackRock announced they've moved to plus 9% ownership on our register yesterday. Got a market cap in about the 2.5 billion range, Australian. And obviously, if we go from a 110,000 ounce per annum producer to 400,000 ounce per annum producer over the next 18 months to 2 years, you can expect a substantial increase in that. As I mentioned, the Okvau gold mines produced over 400,000 ounces at $850 US per ounce. Our Dingo Range project, we came up with 28 million tonne at 1.1 gram for 1 million ounces at Christmas time this year, after only having the project 100% since June 2024. More importantly, there's actually an 830,000 ounce portion of that resource that goes 1.5 grams. We're about to expand on that, and you'll see that in the coming weeks in terms of an upgrade in that resource. The Memot project's a very interesting one. When we were building Okvau during COVID, our guys spent 14 months straight in country building that project without coming out and not even having days off of site, and that's how they built it on time, on budget. They built a 2 million tonne per annum float regrind CIL circuit for $87 million, which is well and truly at the bottom end of the cost curve during COVID. Myself, I did 2 months of hotel isolation, travelling in and out of Cambodia at that time. I was in for Christmas about 4 years ago, whenever it was. I came out the day afterwards and met with the ministry, told them we're on time, on budget to start paying them somewhere in the region of $30 to $40 million of tax and royalties on a yearly basis. Their eyes lit up like dinner plates because they obviously hadn't had their calculators out, and they worked out if they had two, that was $70 to $80 million worth of taxes and royalties. And in fact, this year we paid them $52 million worth of taxes and royalties, and we're the number 2 taxpayer in country. If we build the next project and go underground, we'd be more like $150 million worth of tax and royalties a year, and very significantly, we'd be the number 1 taxpayer in Cambodia. I put this slide up because it actually does tell a story. We started with 1 million ounces after taking over Renaissance Minerals in Cambodia, indicated resource. We've produced 410,000 ounces. At a very short period of time, we've increased our global resources in the company to over 3 million ounces. Everything's open in every direction, and all of the resource increases at the drill bit. We've got 9 rigs working in Cambodia on drilling. We've got 4 rigs working in Australia. They're on day and night shift, and that's why the resources are growing very substantially at a fast rate. The Cambodian growth story, as I said, we've got Memot. Okvau is obviously something we keep replacing reserves on a yearly basis. We're going underground there next year, which adds some production to the project because it's replacing 2 gram dirt through the mill with 6 gram underground dirt. We've got near mine exploration and prospects at Okvau North, Sam Nang, Granite Hill and Okvau, and regional exploration. We've got an application in now for a 450 square kilometre licence in the north of the country, with some fantastic copper gold targets on it. The place is just underexplored. In fact, it's unexplored, and that's why it's so exciting to be the number 1 sort of mining company in the jurisdiction. So as I mentioned, 1,400 square kilometres. You can see Okvau in the middle, Okvau North, Oktung and Prek Long, with intersections like 8 at 19, 9 at 6, 3 at 10, 3 at 31, 3 at 9. They're within 5 kilometres of the actual processing plant. We just need to put drilling into those to turn them into reserves. Memot to the south that we picked up, I gave you the storyline on that, but we started with that one with intersections like 5 at 15, 4 at 13, 2 at 23, and I'll explain those in a moment to you. But again, in a very short period of time, we turned that into 1 million ounces. Everywhere we look, there's mineralisation. I'm not saying everything's 1 million ounces, but this is a completely underexplored belt, and the government's giving us licences as a preference to others. The Okvau resource growth comes really from the underground itself. If you look at that left-hand long section, you'll see that the flat-lying sheeted vein swarms of gold mineralisation in arsenopyrite-rich quartz veins. You can see those vein swarms project below the open-cut pit. We've got 300,000 ounces fully diluted for underground mining at 6 grams of underground resource underneath the pit at present. The traditional flat-lying stuff is intersections like 6 at 11, 10 at 9, 11 at 8, etc., 6 at 9, and you can see why we end up with a fully diluted 6 gram underground position in the traditional underground of the pit. More excitingly, on the eastern side of the pit, we've got a vertical feeder zone, which we found later on in the piece. Where that vertical feeder zone intersects the flatline mineralisation from Okvau, we end up with these ladder rungs of high-grade mineralisation. The 14 at 15, 20 at 9, 15 at 11, 8 at 19, obviously pretty significant intersections. What's really exciting about that, though, is it's really only tested to about 100, 150 metres in the pit, and then the pit itself actually plunges away from that structure. So at depth and along strike, we've got a hell of a lot of potential there to increase resources, underground reserves pretty significantly. And this long section shows that. The dots on this are gram metres. Those of you who don't know what a gram metre is, you'd multiply the intersection by the grade. If you start to look at 100 gram metre intersections, that's pretty significant. That's what you're looking for as a geologist. On the right-hand side of that slide, you'll see up here that there's 4 very strong intersections there. We've added about another 3 or 4 to that. That's where our decline goes into next year. By the September quarter. But the first mineralisation it goes through is 11 at 8.4, 15 at 11.92 and 8 at 19.98. There's a couple other big intersections we put out in our exploration update last week as well. So significantly, that's where we start our underground to complement the open cut. By year 4, we've got a second decline. We've got a second decline coming out the south down here to meet this mineralisation, which is extending at depth. If I move on to Memot, the other growth story, if you look at Okvau on the left, that was 2011 from the air. That's illegal miners on the diorite intrusion into Hornfels metasediments. The right-hand side is Memot in 2024, exactly the same geology, diorite intrusion into Hornfels metasediments. It was exactly the same illegal miners, unfortunately. We moved them off of Okvau and they went down to Memot. We've now moved them from Memot and they've gone to another project of ours in the north of the country. I'm not really sure what I've got 30 exploration geologists in country for. I think I probably could just follow these guys around a little bit more and find some more mineralisation. It is actually important to point out there that with Okvau, we had some delays in development of it because it sat on the edge of an environmentally sensitive area, which we got excluded from that zone. We have none of those problems at Memot, but we do have farmland. That's what I'm talking about, 250 families I've got to move over the next 6 months. This is a surface projection of these very high-grade but narrow mineralised zones that are continuous. There's 9 on that that project to surface. Those veins dip at about 25 degrees to the northeast. In essence, the bulk of them are about a metre at an ounce, but continuous a metre at an ounce. Some bigger, some smaller. But where in long section, what it looks like, and again, we're looking at these gram metre plots, is these flat vein sets, arsenopyrite-rich quartz vein sets, with the high-grade mineralisation. And you get one for a metre, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, about 10 metres of waste and another one, and they've stacked, and we're up to 25 of them, basically, that we've plotted through the project. And the best sort of intersections out of that, you can see up the top there, 6 at 348 grams, 9 at 12 grams. There's a lot of the 1 at 40 type mineralisation in the deposit itself, 5 at 15s, 1 at 30s, 1 at 33s, etc. You can see how quickly we can turn one of these into big ounces with those sort of grades. The Memot project is our potential second operation, as we've said. This looks like it's going to be about 130,000, 140,000 ounces per annum for production. We'll bring that into production for sub 100 million US. The very interesting thing about Memot, whilst it's a very, very similar in geology to Okvau, at Okvau we need to do a float regrind and regrind to 10 micron to get an 87% recovery out of Okvau. At Memot we don't need to do the same. It's got about 30 to 40% gravity recoverable gold, and you can actually see that down there in that core. About 80% of our ordered intersections end up with free gold, visible free gold in the intersections themselves. So from that, we actually don't need to do a fine grind. Conventional grind on this one, which saves me about $20 million US on the build. A conventional grind on this one should get us plus 85% recovery without having to worry about a float regrind circuit. Australian growth, as I mentioned, we've always been big dividend payers. In Australia, you get the benefit of franking credits if you're a company paying tax. So obviously we want an Australian asset, so we can be paying a dividend after 2027. On our own numbers, we bring everything into production, close to 400,000 ounces, and we're making well over 700 million US after tax cash flow from the 3 projects. At least a third of that's coming out of an Australian operation, so that's our goal, is to be giving 30% back of our free cash flow to shareholders as a dividend. What we loved about this project, and I won't bore you with the details of how long it took us to get it and the difficulties in court, etc., but we got 100% of it last year. But what we loved about it, In this district, there's over 60 million ounces of gold endowment in this district, with one belt in the middle with no exploration. That's the belt we've got, the Dingo Range belt. Clearly, it's got the same sort of mineralisation as everything else because we just turned it into 1 million ounces of resources in the last 12 months. And it's a very similar story to when we took over the Duketon belt in Regis, our previous company. It was an unloved belt, had 600,000 ounces of reserves. We turned into 8 million ounces of resources in the next 4 or 5 years and put 3 processing plants on it in 3.5 years. This belt is the same story. It had very little exploration around the 2000s because the gold price was $250. Then it went into some fractured ownership that once it was put together in a singular belt, it ended up with about 10 years of Supreme Court action by a shareholder, which we sold when we took over the company. And what we love about that is that in the whole 1,000 square kilometres of tenure, 35 square kilometres of it's already under granted mining licence while we're comfortable about bringing this into production next year. But we've started to do our regional exploration on this project, systematic regional exploration. The first 3 places we've gone, Great Northern, we've had intersections like 11 at 3.8, 2 at 16, 10 at 2.64. That's only 5 kilometres north of the northern end of the current resource at Boundary. We've come 5 kilometres southwest of Bungarra, the southern end of it, intersections like 5 at 20, 21 at 4, and we've come 25 kilometres south at Banjwan and got 14 metres at 1 in the first drilling program, one line of drilling program. So this is the same story as Duketon. We've got the initial resource, which is turning into reserve. Where we're actually doing this systematic exploration, we're going to add significantly to that resource and reserve base over time. Again, old geologists like me like to see 100-gram metre intersections. Every blue one of those intersections of Boundary, Bungarra and Neptune are plus 100 grams. Significantly, we hadn't drilled it at depth, but we're starting to drill it at depth, and we're getting things like 5 at 20 at 171 metres, 27 at 9 at 153 metres. There's a few more of those intersections are slightly deeper than that in the last exploration update in last quarter. This will turn into an underground mine as well at the same time. What's good about all of our projects in comparison to most of our peers is we've got grade in them all. These are genuine 6-gram diluted underground ore bodies and genuine 1.5 to 2 gram open cuts, where everybody else in the world seems to be doing 1 gram ore bodies now and 3 gram undergrounds. Again, I'm talking about the gram metre plots here. You can see how well distributed this is over a 6.4 kilometre long length of the mineralisation in our current resource. You can see how much gaps there are that aren't drilled. You can see it's only limited by the drilling in terms of how far we've tested on the resources themselves. And you can see a very, very nice even smattering of these plus 100 gram metre intersections across the whole belt. Similarly at the southern end at Bungarra, again, 437 gram metres, 222 gram metres, etc. We're just lacking in drilling, basically, to expand it any further. Obviously, in our company now with the cash flow that we've got and the cash that we've put in bank and what we're going to use that money, obviously, for good by building more projects, we also have to do the right thing environmentally and socially. We've put in place a carbon offset program in Cambodia for our Okvau project. We'll double up on that with Memot, and we'll probably actually offset our Australian asset on the same program. We're planting close to 200,000 trees there per year in that program. That gets us to about carbon zero by year 7 with the tree planted growth, obviously, for the carbon offsets. But it's more about habitat rehabilitation than the carbon offsets for us as a company. Many of you will be aware that the world's lost about 1% of its natural forests per year over the last 100 years. We want to give it a little bit of that back. And if you came over to look at our Okvau project, you see 10 square kilometres of the project itself fenced off. Inside that fence, it's probably the best natural zoo in Cambodia. We've got animals inside the fence because they're not being poached, there's no burning, there's no trees being knocked down that haven't been seen in the district for 25 years. We want to give a bit more of that back. That's what we're planting. 200,000 trees a year, which will end up being 400 with the Memot project. Where we're planting those trees, it's going to be protected by the government, is natural elephant habitat, and that's the sort of stuff that we're adding to. In terms of upcoming developments, we had the updated open pit and underground update in February. We've got exploration update, which came out last week on all of the drilling that we're doing, significant amounts of drilling. Our Memot Gold Project resource update comes out before the quarterly. So does our Dingo Range Gold update for resource, comes out before the quarterly. You'll see ongoing updates about things like the development of our camp, which we're halfway through, 240 man at Dingo Range. And obviously the project, the Memot Gold project, you'll see you'll see some information coming out about that, about how we're moving the people to access the build on that for next year. So I started with the key takeaways. I'm going to give you them again. We've got the right team. The board and management team's done it before with a history of development. All of our builds in the last 20 years have been at the absolute bottom end of the capital cost scale. We're doing that out of cash flow. We're not asking shareholders for any more money. We don't want to. We're very protective about our capital structure. We've got a great producing asset at a $3,300 gold price that's funding all of that. And we've got the organic growth in Australia and Cambodia. So again, Emerald's on a path to become a multiple mine, 400,000 ounces where we think we're going to get to, plus a gold producer with no further dilution to shareholders. Any questions? Oh, it's always about licensing. It's always about the mineral codes in countries. They change it to make it more favourable for Western companies to come in. We came in off the back of one of those. So previous to that, it wasn't there. Now it is. I think we've been asked to wind up, so I think there's obviously more people coming in. So thank you very much for your time.